when we look at modern narratives, I feel like largely we have dystopian narratives of what the future is going to look like crap, and we look into the past and we point to all of these terrible things, and it's, we'll look at all these terrible things. They happened then, they're going to continue now in some new form. And I wonder, do you feel like you have a responsibility to paint something that's less dystopian than that?
I guess um, in the sense that I, um, you know, have this. I think that often the dystopian is kind of cheap. Um, it's sort of adolescent, um, and I certainly, as a teenager, kind of like where it all seemed very, abstract, kind of relished, these reading about the world coming to an end and so forth. And then if you, have kids and stuff like that, you sort of think, well, actually, that would be terrible. But the thing is that, it's also not true to not my sense of life. It's pretty easy if you want to point to things now that are, really not good. Climate change is an obvious example. We've just had this terrible pandemic. We've got extraordinary political polarization. You can, just go on and on and on. Yet, at the same time, we live in a world in which the chance that some random person is going to be born into a situation in which they're chronically hungry is less than it's been for as far back as we know. That all over the number of people who don't have electricity is shrinking like by 100 million or 200 million every year. And that makes a huge difference in people's lives. It's just, there's this, for me, this extraordinary technology now that seems to be allowing us to come up with vaccines very quickly. And I just read a story, and that just was released a day or so ago in Scientific American about how they're trying to design vaccines for flu. And as you probably know, before they kind of guessed what strain was doing, and then they had to do all this elaborate process to incubate them in these eggs and so forth. And so there's often a real mismatch between the flu vaccine and the actual combination of viruses that was out there because of this. And with the mRNA, you could, and now that we can produce them very quickly, you should be able to get an equally effective vaccine done like that. And it was just, all that's happening too, right?
Mm. Yeah. Well, this kind of gets us into the prophet and the wizard situation.
Wizard and the prophet.
Wizard and prophet. I'm sorry. Yeah. Jeez. Forgive me. It's actually something that I feel like people are really interested in too. I was just talking with my students this morning about kind of similar topics and why there isn't more science fiction about the future that is imagining all the best case scenarios. And I think there's kind of like a laziness to it, right? It's so much easier to just imagine how everything breaks than actually imagining how things could be better.
Right. So I'm friendly with a science fiction writer named Neil Stephenson, who I think is a very good writer. And he's a great guy. And so he has
Shiloh's actually, we were at the thrift store the other day, and I picked up a copy of Cryptonomicon, which was a formative book in my experience. And Shiloh's working his way through it right now. So that's
I'm reading it a little bit every morning. It's very good. Yeah.
So Neil has this theory, which is a couple things are going on there. But one is that dystopia really literally is cheap to produce, because with special effects, you can take an existing, environment and just dirty it up. But it requires enormous imagination and effort to conceive of something good that is in the future. And so economics is pushing you towards these images of this. And he thinks also that the lack of sort of positive imagery that we have actually has this very negative effect. because it encourages a kind of passivity and hopelessness. I hope I'm summarizing his argument accurately, and
but it's like you expect it, right? It's just kind of in the collective consciousness that we expect things to go wrong. Essentially, we've seen it a million times in Hollywood and in books, and it's just kind of a foregone conclusion at some point.
And it's quite striking how there's a whole now literature of climate fiction, right? For example, cli-fi it's called, and there's on the quote literary end of it, there's a lot of novels about people in Midwestern college towns looking out the window and feeling sad. And then, on the sort of genre end of it, there's a whole lot of, end of civilization savagery type novels. But there aren't about sort of collective action, which people have done a lot. It's not like, people invented electricity, not even invented electricity, invented means to generate electricity, and then created these incredible systems in a few decades that, brought electricity to huge numbers of people. We have this ability to do stuff. And if you just look around you, there's enormous possibilities for change. And yet there's only a handful of novels that I can think of where three actually, where people imagine doing something about it. One is Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry of the Future, which has got a lot of attention. And Neil himself wrote one called Termination Shock. I'm reading one now, I think it's part of that genre, called The Deluge. And so, so I do think we need more of those. So I guess I am saying I just agree with Neil there.